It rises every morning, and so do we. With fresh perspectives and innovative ideas, we grow trust for our clients in food and agriculture, in their products, processes, people, and brands. It's all we do, and we do it like no one else can. It's a new day in food and agriculture, with new challenges and bright possibilities. When you need someone you can count on, look east.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And want to start this week with the obvious news coming out of the agricultural circles in Washington, D.C. A historic vote in the Senate on a GMO labeling bill that was able to be accomplished late Thursday night, and cloture vote on that Wednesday. And really the vote totals held up pretty similarly throughout the course of this discussion in the Senate. Difference between now and what was discussed in March, and really the vote totals kind of reflect that, Phil.
Can't understand it. We talked about this last week after they had a procedural vote that went, it was nearly 70 votes to go ahead and bring up this legislation this week. They did. They passed it. As we said last week, can't say enough. This is really a strong affirmation on the part of the Senate. It's bipartisan, very strong number of Democrats in affirmation of agricultural biotechnology. And what's interesting, the margin on this bill, it was 63 to 30, and on the final passage there were seven senators who were not here. The margin is very similar to some votes we had back on the Farm Bill on the issue of GMO labeling and whether to allow states to go forward with it, or ensure that they could go forward with it. So it's a very similar margin, very, very strong. Over two-thirds of the Senate really saying that they want to see biotechnology and agriculture go forward.
Now, this is not really at all the first time that we've seen Washington and Congress more broadly try to address the issue of GMO labeling. If you'll remember, about a year ago, the House was able to pass a bill out of their chamber, the Pompeo bill, the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act, whatever you'd like to call it, but that bill was never able to gain much for traction in the Senate, and negotiations were ongoing on that front, and there were efforts to try and move a bill in March. That bill never was able to get over that cloture hump. It did clear out of the Senate Agriculture Committee, but it was never able to get over that cloture hump to really allow it for full floor consideration. So Phil, what was it that they were able to work out in this bill that led to this historic agreement?
The key word was mandatory. It was very important for the industry that there not be on-package labeling, any kind of on-package text that said produced, or a requirement for that said produced by genetic engineering, produced with genetic engineering. That's what's required by the Vermont law, which took effect last Friday, on July the 1st, by the way. But what Senator Stabenow, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Agriculture Committee, said Democrats had to have was a mandatory requirement that there be some kind of at least digital disclosure with the QR code, the smartphone code that we've been talking about for so many weeks. So that was what was embodied in this bill. It still gives food companies the option of using the smartphone code, the QR code, rather than some kind of text like produced with genetic engineering. But it is mandatory. All companies, except for very small businesses, will have to do that. That was the key. And we saw a big number of Democrats. 21 actually voted for the bill on final passage. There was one more who was not there, Chris Coons of Delaware, was a supporter of the bill. That would have brought it up to 22. And then you add the Republicans the Republicans who were missing, and you could have had close to 68, 69 votes if everybody had been here for this bill.
Yeah, certainly an interesting way to compare what ended up getting passed out of the Senate and what really has been discussed. And something that's been discussed previously is this House bill. And the House is able to pass something, but now if this bill is going to make a quick path to President Obama's desk, the House, is going to have to pass this something. Yeah. They're not going to be able to talk about what they've had previously. So Phil, what can you tell us about what the House is looking at in terms of this bill? They've got 1 week left in town, and I imagine it's going to be a pretty busy week.
Yes, it is. Then we go to both party conventions right after each other, and then there's the August recess. So last week is it. The House, we've known for some time that the House was going to have to take whatever the Senate was going to pass. That's what's going to happen. The House leadership, staff, they've been trying, and members of the leadership have been trying to figure out the best way to bring this bill up next week, the way that they can get all the votes that they need. They expect to probably lose some of the most conservative members in the House who don't like that mandatory requirement and may not like preempting state laws. So they're probably going to lose some on the Republican side from the big vote they had last year. They may actually pick up some Democrats, but then they've been trying to figure out can they bring it up without having any amendments or not. Because they really don't want amendments, because you have an amendment, you got to send it back to the Senate. Mm-hmm. So we will have, we should see this bill pass the House next week. We're not sure exactly how it's going to be done yet.
I want to quickly wrap up here with something that actually did pass the House this week, and it's something we've been following kind of on the fringes for a while because there's been, quite frankly, a lot of other things going on. Mm-hmm. But this week, the House was able to pass some legislation that would authorize President Obama's Feed the Future program. What can we read into the significance of this vote, Phil?
Well, this was the major development initiative of President Obama's. It really, in a way, grew out of the food price crisis we had back in 2008 and 2009 as President Obama was coming in. It's an initiative to really try to drive up agricultural production in some of the most hard-pressed countries, but also most promising countries in the world, places like Ethiopia, Tanzania, Guatemala, Haiti. But it's never had congressional authorization. It's never been written into law. As soon as President Obama signs this bill, that will ensure that the Feed the Future extends beyond this administration. There's also some reporting and requirements, and it requires the government to develop a government-wide strategy for addressing food security. There's one other issue in there that was added. It's very, very important. It also authorizes a new food aid program that the administration has been doing informally that allows them to use cash vouchers and foods that are purchased in or near the countries where they're distributed. They've been using this informally with Syrian refugees to get food more quickly to places like Jordan, where the refugee camps are, and in some other Philippines and some other places where there have been areas of stress.
So couple that with the Senate GMO labeling vote, and it was kind of a historic week here in Washington with regards to agriculture policy. A lot of things happened that we had been counting on or waiting on really for a long time, and certainly a week that'll really, in a week when a lot of other things are going on in the world that necessarily were not shining a good light on humanity. A lot of good things happened for a lot of agricultural people.
Yeah, just talking about the historic part of this, we should mention that Senate Agriculture Chairman Pat Roberts said, I was talking about the GMO bill, and he said it was the most important bill on agriculture in 20 years. He's probably going back and talking about the Freedom to Farm law of 1996, which dismantled that old Depression-era system of price supports and production controls. You could probably come up with some other important bills like the Crop Insurance Act, about year 2000, but it's very significant piece of legislation that the Senate approved last night that probably has some very far-reaching effects in terms of maybe not entirely settled the GMO labeling issue.
No, certainly
but it's certainly, as far as Congress is concerned, it has likely settled it.
And we'll end on that note, but certainly a historic week this last week, and we'll see what the House of Representatives has in store for us this next week as they take up and possibly vote on this GMO labeling bill. Right. For Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.